Martial arts and acting legend Chuck Norris has died. His family posted the news online earlier today. Norris redefined the role of the modern tough guy and action hero.
When Chuck Norris died, his family made the announcement short and simple. No details at all. The world was left wondering. Now, everything is changing. His family is opening up and sharing things they never spoke about before. What are they saying? And what really happened in those final moments? Join us as we dive into the heartbreaking story his family is finally ready to tell. The video that became a goodbye. On March 10, 2026, Chuck Norris turned 86 years old, and to mark the moment, his family posted a birthday video. It spread across the internet within hours, and millions of people watched it. What they saw was not a frail old man fading away. What they saw was Chuck Norris, sharp, smiling, and full of life. Nobody expected it to be the last time. In the video, he looked at the camera and spoke with gratitude, talking about leveling up, about another year, about being thankful.
I don't age, I level up.
I'm 84 today, but I feel like I'm 48. God bless you all.
He seemed strong, grounded, and completely at peace. There was nothing in his eyes that said goodbye, and nothing in his voice that sounded like a man running out of time. People commented in their thousands, celebrating him, calling him a legend, saying he was still the toughest man alive. At that moment, it really felt like he would go on forever. But 9 days later, Chuck Norris was dead. No long illness, no slow goodbye, no warning signs that the public ever saw. One moment he was on camera, smiling and grateful, and the next, his family was issuing a statement to confirm that he was gone. The world stopped. Fans could not believe it, and many went back to watch that birthday video again, looking for something they might have missed, a sign, a clue, anything at all. But there was nothing there. Just a man who looked completely fine. A man who looked like he had plenty of life still ahead of him. That is what makes this so hard to process, because Chuck Norris did not look like someone who was about to die. So, what really happened in those 9 days? 9 days that don't add up. 9 days. That is all the time that passed between that smiling birthday video and the announcement that Chuck Norris was gone. And no matter how many times you look at that timeline, something about it just does not sit right. March 10th was a celebration. A moment of joy shared with the world. A man turning 86 and looking every bit as sharp and present as he ever had. There was laughter, there was gratitude, there was energy in his eyes that most people half his age could not match. Everyone who watched that video walked away feeling the same thing, that Chuck Norris was doing just fine. Then March 19th arrived, and everything changed. His family released a short statement confirming his passing, and the world was left completely stunned, scrambling to make sense of something that felt impossible. There had been no public reports of illness, no hospital visits that anyone knew about, no quiet warnings from people close to him that something was wrong. From the outside looking in, Chuck Norris had simply been there one day and gone the next, with almost nothing in between to explain how it happened. That gap, those 9 silent days, is where all the questions live. People who knew him personally described a man who was disciplined about his health, careful about what he put into his body, and deeply committed to staying strong well into his later years. He was not someone who ignored warning signs or pushed through pain without paying attention. He was methodical, focused, and aware of his body in ways that most people never are. So the idea that something could have gone so wrong so quickly without anyone seeing it coming felt deeply unsettling to those who loved him. His family was blindsided. That much became clear in the days that followed, as tributes poured in and the people closest to him began to speak publicly for the first time. There was a rawness in their words, a kind of shock that does not come from a long, expected goodbye. This was not the grief of people who had time to prepare. This was the grief of people who woke up one morning and lost someone they thought they still had. And that is the part that keeps pulling at you, because when someone lives the way Chuck Norris lived, with discipline and routine and a body trained for decades to endure, you do not expect them to go quietly in 9 days without a single public sign that anything was wrong. Was there something happening behind closed doors that the world simply did not know about? Were there private struggles being carried in silence while the rest of the world watched that birthday video and assumed everything was fine? The family stayed quiet for a while, and that silence only made the questions louder. Something about those 9 days does not add up, and the truth is only just beginning to surface. The man behind the legend. Most people thought they knew Chuck Norris, and honestly, it is hard to blame them. For decades, his name meant one thing: toughness. He was the man who kicked his way through every obstacle, the action hero who never flinched, the cultural symbol that an entire generation built jokes around because the idea of him being vulnerable felt almost impossible to imagine. He was bigger than life, and the world treated him that way. But the real Chuck Norris was something far quieter and far more interesting than the legend the world had built around him. Away from the cameras and the Hollywood lights, he had long since settled into a life that most action stars would never choose. He lived on a ranch in Texas, surrounded by open land, fresh air, and the kind of stillness that puts everything else into perspective. There were no red carpets, no premieres, no desperate attempts to stay relevant in an industry that moves fast and forgets faster. He had walked away from all of that, deliberately and without regret, choosing a life built around something more meaningful than fame. His days were structured around discipline and routine, which should surprise nobody who knows anything about his background. He had built his entire career on the foundation of martial arts, and that same philosophy carried over into how he lived privately. Early mornings, physical training, intentional habits, a deep respect for the body and what it could do when treated with care. Even at 85, the year before he died, people who spent time with him described a man who moved with purpose and took his health seriously in ways that most people simply do not. Family was at the absolute center of everything he did. His wife Gina, his children, his grandchildren, the people in his immediate circle, they were not just important to him, they were the whole point. Fame had given him a platform, but family had given him a reason. That distinction mattered deeply to him, and it shaped every major decision he made in the later chapters of his life. He was also a man of deep faith, something he rarely spoke about loudly, but carried consistently in the way he lived. It grounded him, gave him perspective, and kept him anchored to something larger than himself, even when the world around him was loud and chaotic. To the public, Chuck Norris was a myth, a walking punchline in the best possible way, a symbol of indestructibility that pop culture never quite let go of. People loved the idea of him almost as much as they loved the man himself, but the man himself was something different. Softer in some ways, heavier in others, carrying things beneath the surface that the legend never quite showed. Behind all that strength, behind the discipline and the routine and the quiet ranch life, he was carrying a weight that very few people knew about, and it had been building for a long time. The hidden grief strength has a cost. Most people never see it because the strongest ones rarely let you look close enough, but it is always there, sitting quietly beneath the surface, accumulating weight with every loss, every goodbye, every moment of pain that gets pushed down in the name of staying strong for everyone else. Chuck Norris knew that cost better than most. In the months leading up to his death, he had experienced a level of personal loss that would have broken many people completely. It did not announce itself loudly. It did not show up in headlines or interviews. It simply settled into his life, quietly and heavily, the way grief always does when you are the kind of person who carries things privately. In 2024, he lost his mother. For a man who had spoken publicly about the influence his family had on who he became, losing a parent at any age carries a particular kind of weight. It is not just the person you lose, it is the version of yourself that only exists in relation to them. A piece of your own story disappears alongside them, and no amount of strength or discipline makes that easier to absorb. Then, in December of 2025, his first wife passed away.
Diane Holchek, the former wife of actor and martial arts legend Chuck Norris, has passed away at the age of 84. According to reports, Holchek died peacefully at her home in Texas.
The details around her death were handled with the same quiet dignity that Chuck Norris had always applied to his private life. But the impact of that loss was impossible to ignore for those paying close attention. She had been part of his story, part of the years that shaped him, part of a shared history that stretched back across decades. Losing her meant losing another piece of a life that he had already spent years building and protecting. Two major losses, less than 2 years apart, both arriving in the final stretch of his own life. Now go back and watch that birthday video from March 10th, 2026, the one where he smiles at the camera and talks about gratitude and leveling up and being thankful for another year. Watch it again with this context sitting in your mind, and something shifts. The message doesn't change, but the weight behind it does. A man who had just spent the better part of 2 years grieving, standing in front of a camera and choosing gratitude anyway. That is not just a birthday message. That is something closer to a testimony. People who carry grief the way Chuck Norris carried it do not collapse publicly. They adjust, they endure, they show up, they keep moving, because that is what they have always done. But the body keeps count even when the mind refuses to slow down, and loss has a way of accumulating in places you cannot always see. His family watched all of this. They were present for the losses, present for the quiet moments in between, and present for the grief that he never made a public show of. They understood what he had been carrying, even when the rest of the world did not. And now, finally, they are talking about it because the man they knew deserves more than the legend the world remembers. The life he chose. Over fame. There is a version of Chuck Norris that Hollywood wanted to keep alive forever. The action star, the box office draw, the man whose name alone could sell a movie. That version was profitable, recognizable, and endlessly marketable. The industry had a place for him, and for a long time, he filled it without question. Then he made a choice that very few people in his position ever make, and he walked away. It was not a dramatic exit, not a public fallout with a studio or a bitter retirement announcement. It was quieter than that, more deliberate, more personal. Gina, his wife, had been dealing with serious health challenges, and Chuck Norris looked at everything he had, the career, the spotlight, the opportunities still coming his way, and decided that none of it mattered more than being present for the woman he loved. So, he stepped back, moved away from the noise, and devoted himself to something that fame could never compete with. He became a caretaker. That word does not carry the same weight as action hero or martial arts legend, but in many ways, it demands more. Caregiving requires a different kind of strength, the kind that does not get applause, the kind that shows up every single day without recognition or reward, the kind that asks you to put someone else's needs so completely above your own that your own desires quietly move to the back of the line. Chuck Norris did that without complaint, without seeking credit, and without letting the world turn it into a story about his sacrifice. His children watched all of this. His grandchildren grew up around a man who was not performing toughness for a camera, but living it in the most private and unglamorous way possible. The version of their father and grandfather that they knew was not the one from the movies. It was the one who showed up, who stayed, who chose presence over prestige every single time the choice presented itself. Outside of his role as caretaker, he remained deeply invested in the people around him. He was involved in his children's lives in ways that went far beyond the occasional visit or phone call. He was present, engaged, and intentional about the relationships that mattered most to him, because he understood something that fame had taught him the hard way, that time is the only thing you cannot earn back once it is gone. His faith played a significant role in all of this as well, shaping how he approached sacrifice, how he understood service, and how he made peace with a life that looked very different from the one the public had imagined for him. He was not bitter about stepping back. If anything, the people closest to him described a man who seemed more settled, more grounded, and more at peace than he had ever been during the height of his career. The world saw a legend who had gone quiet, but his family saw something far more valuable. They saw a man who finally knew exactly who he was, and chose to be that person every single day, regardless of whether anyone was watching. That version of Chuck Norris never made the headlines, but it is the version that mattered most. The trip that changed everything. By early March of 2026, Chuck Norris was in a good place. That is not an assumption or a generous reading of the situation. It is what the people around him consistently described in the weeks and months that followed his passing. Despite the grief he had been carrying, despite the losses of the previous 2 years, he had settled into something that resembled peace, and the family had decided to mark that with something simple and meaningful: a vacation together in Kauai, Hawaii. Kauai is the kind of place that slows everything down, green mountains rolling into the ocean, air that feels different from anywhere else, a quietness that does not feel empty but full. It was the right setting for a family that had been through a great deal. a place designed by nature to remind you that the world is still beautiful, even when it has been hard. Chuck arrived in Kauai, looking by all accounts like a man who was glad to be there. He was not dragging himself through the trip out of obligation. He was engaged, present, and genuinely enjoying the time with his family. People who were around him during those early days of the vacation described an energy about him that was warm and easy, the energy of someone who had made his peace with life and was simply enjoying what was in front of him. He was still training. That detail matters because it says something important about where he was physically in those final days. A man who has given up, a man whose body is quietly failing in ways he can feel, does not train. He rests, he withdraws, he conserves. Chuck Norris was doing the opposite. He was moving, working, maintaining the physical discipline that had defined his entire life, right up until the very end of it. His grandchildren were there, and watching him with them painted a picture that was a long way from anything Hollywood had ever put on screen. This was not the Walker Texas Ranger version of Chuck Norris. It was the grandfather version, softer around the edges, quicker to laugh, completely uninterested in performing anything for anyone. Just a man enjoying his family in one of the most beautiful places on earth. The atmosphere of that trip was, by every account, peaceful and normal, and full of the kind of small moments that only matter when you look back at them later. There was no cloud over it, no quiet sense that something was wrong, no instinct from anyone present that this trip would become the last thing they all did together. That is the part that stays with you, because vacations are supposed to be a pause, a break from ordinary life before you return to it refreshed. Nobody books a flight to Kauai expecting it to be the final chapter. Nothing about this trip felt like the end. And that is exactly what makes what happened next so completely devastating. The last perfect days, March 18th, 2026, was, by every account, a good day. A genuinely good day. The kind that feels ordinary while it is happening and only becomes significant later, when you understand that it was the last one. Chuck Norris woke up that morning in Kauai and moved through the day the way he had always moved through his days, with intention, with energy, and with the kind of physical engagement that had defined him since long before he was famous. He trained. At 85 years old, on vacation in Hawaii, with his family around him, he still trained because that was simply who he was. A man for whom discipline was not a performance, but a default setting. Something he did not think about because it had long since become instinct. People who were with him that day described him as jovial. That word came up more than once in the accounts that followed, and it is a specific kind of word, not just happy, not just relaxed, but openly, warmly, expressively good-humored. He was laughing, he was engaged, he was present in a way that radiated something genuine. There was nothing subdued about him, nothing that hinted at a man who was struggling beneath the surface, nothing that the people around him read as a warning sign of any kind. His family moved through that day alongside him, sharing meals, sharing space, sharing the kind of easy time together that you only get when everyone is unhurried and the setting is beautiful and there is nowhere else any of you need to be. Kauai has a way of doing that, of making a single day feel complete and sufficient on its own, and March 18th was that kind of day for the Norris family. There were moments of laughter that his family would later hold on to with everything they had. Small things, the kind that would never make a biography or a documentary, but live forever in the private memory of the people who were there. A joke that landed, a smile that lingered, a moment of connection between a man and the people he loved most in the world that nobody thought to document because nobody knew they needed to. He went to bed that night the same way he had ended thousands of nights before. A man who had lived his day fully, moved his body, been present with his family, and had nothing obvious pressing on him that the people around him could see. The day had been full and warm and completely unremarkable in the best possible way. And then the night came. And within hours of that last perfect day, of that laughter and that training, and those small, warm moments that his family will spend the rest of their lives replaying, everything collapsed without warning, without a single sign that it was coming, and without any time at all to prepare for what was about to happen. The night no one saw coming. Nobody was ready. That is the truth at the center of everything that happened on the night of March 18th into the early hours of March 19th, and it is the detail that makes the whole thing so difficult to absorb. There was no warning, no slow build, No moment where someone in that family looked at Chuck Norris and thought that something was seriously wrong. One moment, the day was fine, and then suddenly, it was not.
Norris was rushed to a hospital in Hawaii, where he lived on the island of Kauai with an undisclosed health emergency. Reports say he was in good spirits, even speaking on the phone. But then his health took a sudden and dramatic turn for the worse.
The medical emergency came on suddenly, the way the worst ones always do, without introduction, without a grace period, without any of the lead time that allows a family to gather themselves before the ground shifts beneath them. Something happened overnight that required immediate action, and in a place as remote as Kauai, immediate action carries its own complications. Getting to advanced medical care from a remote part of the island is not the same as being 20 minutes from a major hospital. And that distance, however small it may sound, matters enormously when time is the only thing standing between a person and the worst possible outcome. He was rushed to the hospital. His family moved with him because that is what his family did. They stayed close, they showed up, they did not leave him alone in the hard moments. But the atmosphere in that hospital was nothing like the warmth of the day that had just passed. It was urgent and uncertain and heavy with the particular kind of fear that arrives when someone you love is suddenly beyond your ability to help. Medical staff worked quickly, but the situation was serious from the beginning, and hope, though present, was fragile. The family held on to it the way people do in those moments, carefully, quietly, not wanting to speak too loudly about what they were afraid of. The hours passed slowly. Updates came and went, and with each one, the picture became a little harder to hold on to. A man who had been laughing and training and completely alive just hours earlier was now fighting in a hospital room in Hawaii, and the people who loved him most could do nothing but stay close and hope. There was no time to prepare for this. There was no version of that vacation that anyone had imagined ending this way. The night was long, and hope was fading fast. The final hours and family goodbye. By the time morning arrived on March 19, 2026, the family already knew. Not because anyone had said the words yet, but because grief has its own language, and the people who loved Chuck Norris had been reading it through the long hours of that night, quietly and without wanting to believe what it was telling them. He passed away surrounded by his family, and that detail, small as it might seem against the enormity of the loss, matters more than almost anything else in this story. He was not alone. The people he had spent his entire life choosing, his wife, his children, the ones he had walked away from Hollywood for, the ones he had shown up for every single day without asking for recognition, they were all there. They were with him at the end, the same way he had been with them throughout his life, completely and without reservation. His family released a statement that was short, dignified, and full of a grief that no carefully chosen words could fully contain. They spoke about his faith, his love for his family, and the man they knew privately, the one the world had only ever seen pieces of. There was a tenderness in that statement that said more than the words themselves, the tenderness of people describing someone they had not just loved, but truly known. His children spoke publicly in the days that followed, and what they said quietly dismantled every version of Chuck Norris that pop culture had ever constructed. They did not talk about the movies or the awards or the cultural phenomenon. They talked about a father who was present, who was gentle, who made them feel safe, who showed up consistently and without fanfare for the entirety of their lives. They talked about a man whose greatest performances had nothing to do with a camera. The tributes poured in from every corner of the world, from fans who had grown up watching him, from fellow martial artists who had trained alongside him, from people who had never met him but felt inexplicably like they had lost someone familiar. Because, in a way, they had. Chuck Norris had been part of the furniture of popular culture for so long that his absence left a shape in the room that nobody quite knew how to fill. He was gone, and the world felt it immediately. The truth about his legacy. When the news broke, the world stopped scrolling. Social media filled within minutes, trending in countries where Chuck Norris films had never even been officially released, which says everything you need to know about the kind of mark he left on the world. The reaction was not just large, it was personal, and that distinction matters because celebrities come and go, but the ones who make people feel something real are much rarer than fame alone can explain. The jokes stopped. For a generation that had spent years turning his name into a punchline about invincibility, the silence that replaced those jokes was its own kind of tribute, a collective acknowledgement that the myth had always been standing in front of a man, and the man was gone. What remained was something more honest and more lasting than anything the legend had ever offered. A man who chose his family over his career, who carried grief privately and showed up anyway, who trained on vacation at 85 and spent his final days laughing with his grandchildren in Hawaii. A man of faith, of discipline, of quiet and consistent sacrifice. He was not unstoppable. He never was. He was human, fragile in the ways all humans are fragile, susceptible to loss and grief, and the limits of a body that even decades of training cannot protect forever. And that is precisely what makes him unforgettable. Not the myth, but the man beneath it, who turned out to be far more remarkable than any legend could ever capture. What part of his story touched you most? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below, like this video, and subscribe for more incredible stories just like this one.